Plants conquered land 475 million years ago. Vertebrate animals followed about 100 million years later. And then, for an almost incomprehensible stretch of time, not a single animal with a backbone touched a plant. Hundreds of millions of years of lush green forests, towering club mosses, 40 meters tall, and nothing with a spine even tried to bite. That gap, that refusal, is one of the weirdest unsolved puzzles in the history of life on Earth. And a paper published February 10th, 2026, in Nature Ecology and Evolution, might have just cracked it open. A team of researchers CT scanned a 307 million-year-old skull from Nova Scotia. And inside that skull, hidden behind a clamped, shut jaw, they found something no one expected. An entire second set of teeth. Grinding teeth. Crushing teeth. Teeth designed for one thing: eating plants. And that changes when we think complex land ecosystems first took shape. But to understand why this matters so much, you need to see just how strange the old story was. So here's the situation. Plants are on land for almost 200 million years before any vertebrate even considers eating one. 200 million years. To put that in perspective, dinosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago, and that feels like ancient history to us. Triple that time span, and that is how long plants were just sitting there, untouched by anything with a backbone. Insects figured it out pretty early. Bugs were munching on plants within a few million years of them showing up on land. But vertebrates, the animals that would eventually become reptiles, mammals, us, they wanted nothing to do with it. And it is not because they were stupid. It is because eating plants is genuinely one of the hardest things evolution has ever had to figure out. Think about it this way. Plant cells are wrapped in cellulose. Cellulose is this incredibly tough structural molecule. And here's the thing. No vertebrate on Earth, not one, can break it down on its own. Not cows, not horses, not elephants. Every single plant-eating vertebrate alive today relies on bacteria in its gut to do the actual work. Tiny microbes fermenting the cellulose, breaking it apart, extracting the energy. That is not a simple upgrade. That requires a completely redesigned digestive system. You need a bigger gut to house all those bacteria. You need a barrel-shaped body to carry that bigger gut. You need specialized teeth to physically grind the plant material down before it even reaches the gut. And you generally need to be bigger because the energy return per bite is so much lower than just eating another animal. So for a long time, early land vertebrates did the easy thing. They ate each other. They ate insects. They ate anything that moved. The forests around them were basically furniture, background scenery in a world of predators and prey. The textbook version of this story said that vertebrates finally cracked the code around 300 to 305 million years ago. Late Carboniferous, early Permian. The classic early herbivores were animals like Diadectes, this heavy-set reptile relative, and Edaphosaurus, one of those sail-backed creatures you have probably seen in dinosaur books. Scientists had identified 5 separate lineages that independently evolved plant eating, and all of them were amniotes or very close to amniotes. Amniotes being the group that figured out how to lay eggs on land, the ancestors of all reptiles and mammals. The conclusion seemed solid. Eating plants was hard, it took a long time to evolve, and only the most advanced land animals managed to pull it off. That was the story. And then someone found a skull in a tree stump. The fossil was discovered by Brian Hebert, a local avocational paleontologist on Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia. He was working along wave-battered sea cliffs during a field season led by Hilary Madden from Carleton University. Now, doing paleontology in Nova Scotia is its own kind of adventure. The Bay of Fundy has the highest tides in the world. When researchers work these coastal cliffs, they are literally racing the ocean. The tide comes back in, and your dig site is underwater, and you are working beneath unstable cliffs that could collapse on you at any moment. As lead author Aryan Mann from the Field Museum in Chicago put it, paleontologists hate excavating in cliffs because the cliff could come down on you. Hebert found the skull embedded inside a fossilized tree stump, 307 million years old, and when Mann first laid eyes on it, he knew what it was almost immediately. Within 5 seconds of looking at it, he said, "I was like, oh, that is a pantylid microsaur." The skull was about 10 centimeters long, heart-shaped, wide at the back, and narrowing to a blunt, downturned snout. But there was a problem. The animal had died with its mouth clamped shut. All the interesting anatomy was locked inside. So they put it in a CT scanner. They assembled hundreds of X-ray slices into a detailed three-dimensional model. And when they digitally opened that jaw for the first time in 307 million years, what they saw was, in Madden's words, a mouth jam packed with a whole additional set of teeth for crushing and grinding food, like plants. Not just teeth along the edges of the jaw, where you would expect them. Rows of robust teeth lining the roof of the mouth. More teeth on the lower jaw, arranged in fields that interlocked with the upper ones like puzzle pieces. And near the back, one massive tooth that fits snugly against the roof-mounted teeth, creating a broad, grinding surface. When they put the whole thing under an electron microscope, they found wear facets. Tiny scratches on the tooth surfaces that only form when upper and lower teeth grind against each other repeatedly. That is a signature of herbivory. This animal was chewing plants. They named it Tyrannoroter heberti, Herbert's tyrant digger. Based on its skull and the more complete skeletons of its relatives, it was probably about 30 centimeters long, roughly the size of an American football. Man described it as a little big, chunky, cute, football-sized reptile-like thing. Picture something like a modern Australian shingleback skink. Small, stocky, built close to the ground. Not exactly what you imagine when you think of an animal that reshaped land ecosystems, but size is not the point. The point is what was happening inside that mouth. And when that mouth was happening, 307 million years old, that is solidly within the Carboniferous period, millions of years before the textbook date for the first vertebrate herbivores. And that is just the confirmed specimen. When the team went back and re-examined other fossils from the same broader group, the pantelids, they found similar herbivorous dental features in specimens dating as far back as 318 million years ago. That pushes the origin of vertebrate plant eating back by 15 to 20 million years from the previous consensus. And it establishes an entirely new, sixth independently evolved lineage of herbivorous vertebrates. But the most disruptive part is not even the date, it is what kind of animal this was. Remember, the old story said herbivory was an amniote innovation. Only the most advanced land vertebrates could pull off the switch to plants. Tyrannoroter was not an amniote. It was a stem amniote, an animal sitting on the evolutionary branch leading toward the group that would eventually split into reptiles and the ancestors of mammals, but not quite there yet. As Hans-Dieter Suess from the Smithsonian, one of the study's co-authors, put it, Tyrannoroter heberti is of great interest because it was long thought that herbivory was restricted to amniotes. It is a stem amniote, but has a specialized dentition that could be used for processing plant fodder. That is a carefully worded statement, and we will come back to why it is worded that way. But the implication is huge. If herbivory shows up in animals that had not yet evolved the key amniote innovations, then eating plants was not some late-stage upgrade that required a particular level of evolutionary sophistication. It was something vertebrates started experimenting with almost as soon as they committed to living on land. Now, how did they get there? How do you go from a strict meat eater to something that can process tough fibrous plants? The study proposes a pathway, and it is genuinely clever. Insects were the gateway. Think about insect exoskeletons. They are made of chitin. Chitin is a structural molecule that is remarkably similar to cellulose at the molecular level. Both form tough crystalline fibers. Both are linked by the same type of chemical bond. So if you are an early tetrapod evolving teeth that can crush hard insect shells, you are accidentally building hardware that can also crush plant fibers. The dental tools overlap, but teeth are only half the problem. You still need those gut bacteria to actually digest the cellulose, and the study has a suggestion for that too. If early tetrapods were eating herbivorous insects, bugs that had already consumed plants, they could have been inadvertently seeding their own guts with plant-digesting microbes, eating a bug that ate a leaf and accidentally inheriting the bacterial toolkit needed to process that leaf directly. As evolutionary biologist Michael Coates from the University of Chicago described it, The eventual shift to direct plant eating shortened the food chain by cutting out insects as the middlemen. So the proposed sequence goes like this. Step 1, eat insects with hard shells. Step 2, develop teeth that can crush hard things. Step 3, eat herbivorous insects and pick up their gut microbes as a bonus. Step 4, start eating plants directly because now you have both the teeth and the bacteria to handle it. It is evolution taking a roundabout path to an enormous ecological shift. And the teeth on the roof of Tyrannoroter's mouth? According to Coates, those were likely a leftover trait from its aquatic ancestors, repurposed for an entirely new function on land. Old hardware, new job. To really appreciate what this means, you have to picture the world this animal lived in, 307 million years ago. Nova Scotia sat near the equator, covered in tropical swamp forests, so dense and so productive that their compressed remains would eventually become the coal deposits that fueled the Industrial Revolution. The atmosphere had about 35% oxygen compared to 21% today, and all that extra oxygen did something terrifying to the arthropods. Dragonflies with 75-centimeter wingspans, millipedes 2 meters long, scorpions a meter from head to tail. People sometimes call this era the age of cockroaches. Towering club mosses reach 40 meters, their distinctive diamond-patterned bark now fossilized in coal seams around the world. And somewhere in that alien landscape, a chunky little animal the size of a football was quietly doing something no vertebrate had reliably done before. Eating the forest. That shift, small as the animal was, matters enormously. Because once vertebrates start eating plants directly, the entire structure of land ecosystems changes. You get a new base to the food web. You get herbivores that can reach much larger body sizes because they are tapping into the most abundant energy source on land. You get new predators that specialize in hunting those herbivores. You get plants evolving defenses against being eaten. The whole system cascades. As man said, this is highly important because it means that the essential components of the terrestrial ecosystems we recognize today as herbivore-dominated have been around and maintained since the Carboniferous period. We tend to think of the modern food chain, plants at the bottom, herbivores in the middle, predators on top, as something that has always been there. It has not. Something had to build it. And according to this study, that construction project started earlier than we realized. Now, I would not be doing my job if I did not tell you where this study has limits. And it does. First, the obvious. This is one skull, one individual animal. There is no body, no stomach contents, no fossilized feces that would directly prove what it ate. The entire case for herbivory rests on tooth shape, the way the teeth fit together, the wear patterns on their surfaces, and the size of the muscle attachment sites on the skull. Those are well-established methods in paleontology, and the dental batteries in Tyrannoroter are strikingly similar to those of confirmed herbivores from later periods, including the hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs. But it is still indirect evidence. Man himself was careful about this. Echoing his former advisor Sue's, he emphasized that herbivory is best seen as a gradient. Tyrannoroter probably ate smaller animals, including insects, in addition to vegetation. It was not a cow. It was more likely an omnivore that leaned heavily into plant material. The grinding teeth tell us it could process plants. They do not tell us what percentage of its diet was green. Second, there is a phylogenetic issue. Where exactly Tyrannoroter's group, the Recumbirostrans, sits on the tree of life is still debated. Different analyses place them in different positions. Some put them as stem amniotes, which is what this paper argues. Others put them as a different kind of early tetrapod entirely. And the big claim that herbivory is not an amniote-only innovation depends partly on where these animals actually belong in the family tree. The authors acknowledge this openly. They say the phylogenetic position of microsaurian tetrapods remains uncertain, but they also argue that regardless of where you place them, the dental evidence shows they independently evolved plant eating. The finding is robust under any scenario. That is a reasonable claim, but it is worth being aware of the uncertainty. Third, the dating. 307 million years for the named specimen is solid, but the older pantylid fossils they reference, The ones potentially pushing herbivory back to 318 million years are based on re-examining existing museum specimens with new eyes. That re-examination is valuable, but those older specimens deserve their own dedicated studies to confirm the interpretation. So should you believe this? I think the core finding is strong. A 307 million-year-old animal with grinding teeth, wear facets, and a skull built for chewing tough material. That is hard to explain away. Whether it was a full herbivore or an omnivore that could handle plants is a fair question, but either way, vertebrates were processing plant material much earlier than the old timeline suggested. The broader claim about 318 million years needs more work, but it points in an exciting direction. And there is one more layer to this story that the researchers themselves highlighted, a layer that connects 300 million-year-old fossils to something very present. Tyrannoroter lived near the end of the Carboniferous period, just before one of the fastest ecological collapses in the geological record. Around 305 million years ago, the climate shifted from icehouse to greenhouse conditions. The vast tropical swamp forests that had defined the Carboniferous fragmented and disappeared. This event is called the Carboniferous rainforest collapse, and the consequences for early herbivores were devastating. Man described Tyrannoroter's lineage as becoming a dead group walking after the collapse. These early plant eaters had locked themselves into a relationship with specific plant communities. When those plants disappeared, the herbivores followed. Amphibians were devastated. It was the amniotes, the true egg-laying reptiles and early proto-mammals, that weathered the storm, diversifying into the empty niches. That collapse essentially cleared the stage for the Permian explosion of reptile and synapsid diversity that would eventually produce dinosaurs, mammals, and everything alive today. And man was explicit about why this resonates now. The Carboniferous icehouse to greenhouse transition, he said, was the last icehouse to greenhouse transition since the one we are currently in. An animal that evolved to eat plants 307 million years ago. A climate that shifted, and a lineage that did not survive the change, locked into a food source that vanished beneath them. The majority of questions left in early tetrapod evolution, man said, are in front of us, not behind us. New fossils change stories all the time, and this is the case of a new fossil coming to light and changing our entire perspective on the evolution of life on land. 307 million years ago, a football-sized animal opened its mouth and bit into a fern. Inside that mouth, hidden for all of recorded science until a CT scanner revealed it, was the machinery for an entirely new way of living. A way of living that would eventually build every terrestrial ecosystem on the planet. And we almost missed it. Locked inside a clamped, shut jaw, in a fossilized tree stump, on a cliff that the ocean tries to swallow twice a day. If you want more of the latest science that rewrites what we thought we knew, well, there is always something new buried in the rock, or hiding in the scan.